Over the past couple of years, author and journalist Dolly Alderton has seen her star steadily rise. Her incredibly successful debut memoir is a must-read for millennial women seeking comfort and solace about their dating mishaps through Dolly's candidness about her own. Yet Miss Alderton found herself in hot water when she applied this candidness to other areas of her life. Writing for the Sunday Times, Alderton confessed to feeling guilty over the privilege from her private school education and the affluent networks it afforded her. There's no question Alderton is an incredibly talented writer, but even she admits without her private education, perhaps that talent might never have been nurtured or realised. Yet this honesty left many uncomfortable, with liberal lovies accusing her of not doing enough and others calling out this privilege. I think Miss Alderton should be applauded rather than berated. There is indeed a hierarchy of inclusion in society, but a key step to levelling the playing field requires honest acknowledgement by those with privilege. When it comes to inequality, the blissful ignorance of the haves is why things remain the same. So, Dolly, you get a like and a thumbs up from me.
OK, right. I'm going to tell you a little story now. Story time with Big Phil.
Right.
I went to private school.
I was a have-not, right? I was a have-not, all right?
Did I tell you I was from a council estate?
I was, yeah.
Yeah, me too.
When I was at school, I did one of those little... Remember the little egg tests you do, where you got a multiple-choice thing?
Yeah.
And they found out that my IQ was above 140, OK?
Wow.
And I was disruptive at school. So what they did was the state paid for me to go to a public school, Kingham Hill, in Oxford, all right? So I went to this public school.
Wow.
When I got there,
You
all
went
right?
to private school?
When I got there, when I got to this private school, I met the very people you're on about head-on, all right? Yeah. I was nicknamed Kevin because I was poor. I had to wear a school uniform that wasn't tailored, and I got mercilessly picked on and was completely excluded from any activity whatsoever.
Wow.
In the end,
now.
after about a year, after about a year and a half, the perpetrators of the main of the bullying both got filled in, OK, by myself. I completely lost it. They put me in a sanatorium. I ended up in children's homes permanently, OK?
Wow.
Now, it set about thinking about me right then, you know, how am I ever going to get on in life? Because these people are just going to block me with everything I ever do. As a plus side, just going a little bit full circle with that, my own son, OK, has come from a council background, has managed to get himself through uni and is now an officer in the army, OK? So he's a lieutenant now. So it does show that you can, nowadays, bypass some of that stuff and actually become part of the so-called social elite gentry or whatever it is you want to be. But it is extremely difficult. And I did feel at the time as if there was... I didn't feel subhuman, inferior to anybody.
But they
I
looked
did
at
feel
you that
they
way.
were looking down on me
Yeah.
totally. You know, Kevin, here comes Kevin. Oh, Kevin hasn't got this, Kevin hasn't got that.
They just
you know what I mean? And I've got
Kevin.
completely...
What's the Kevin? Am I
I don't know,
missing
Kevin
it?
was a
Kevin
poor
thing?
person's
Is
name,
it a bit
apparently.
like
You know what I
Tracy?
mean?
Is it a bit like Tracy?
Sharon and Tracy.
Yeah, Sharon and Tracy at the time.
So what's the conclusion you reach from that?
The conclusion I've reached for that is exactly what we were saying here, that it's extremely difficult to forge ahead because all these people have got such a massive head start on you that they've got all their friends in Deloitte, they've got all their friends
But
here,
we
that, and the
need
other.
them to acknowledge
and
that.
we need to we need
Yeah, 'cause
people. Now,
that's
now
the
the army
problem.
has acknowledged that. The
Yes.
army now does recruit from all over. There's not so much of a... There's quite a few lads from social backgrounds becoming officers now, and I think it's because the government have opened up and you can actually get loans and you can get yourself into the thing and educated properly.
Well, Greg, your career is a sort of a test case of what we should be doing in this country in terms of actually nurturing people from all backgrounds to rise to the top.
I remember
What was your
being...
experience?
When I was running the BBC,
Yeah.
I remember saying to
a
everybody...
bastion of privilege.
I was saying to... No, I once said to everybody in the executive, OK, how many of you went to private school? And it was about half, which...
And did you?
Which, no.
All right.
OK, but how
It was
many
about
of
half.
them
I
went to
then
Oxbridge?
said, how many of your kids are going to private school?
Yeah.
90%.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the problem. Alan Bennett said
Okay.
it better than anyone else I've seen. He says this, the words of Alan in this book about engines of privilege,
Yep.
the words of Alan Bennett reverberate still. Private education is not fair, he famously declared in June 2014, during a sermon at King's College Chapel, Cambridge. Those who provide it know it. Those who pay for it know it.
Yep.
Those who have to sacrifice in order to purchase it know it. And those who receive it know it.
Yeah.
Or they should.
Yeah.
And if their education ends without it dawning on them, then that education was wasted.
Yeah.
I mean, there is no doubt in my mind people buy privilege.
Yeah.
That's now you could say
And
that's right or
that
wrong.
is the ultimate example
Sure.
of it.
And that's
Yeah.
what they're trying to buy privilege.
Yeah.
Now, politically, all my kids went to state schools. I could have easily afforded them to go to private schools, but I wanted them to go to state schools because I didn't want them to only know those people right, in life. I didn't want them to be that. The governments, successive, particularly Labour governments, could have done more than they have done to take this away. First of all, they could end the tax breaks that the public school gets. Yep. The second, they could end the relationship between certain schools and certain universities, particularly Oxford and Cambridge. Yep. Well, you know, you go to that school, you get into Oxford. Yep. Doesn't matter if you get a couple of A-levels or not, or what you do.
It's a direct pipeline.
So you could begin to change it.
So, go on, sorry, Michelle, you go. Yeah.
Well, what I was going to say is, I think we've got this fascination about equality and... You know, what I mean is we have this constant desire to pull people down and then pull this up and make everything equal. And life's not always equal, and life's not always fair.
We just want everybody to have an equal start. It's not about pulling.
But my background, I don't have like, you know, privilege and all the rest of it. I'm very grateful for my background. I've had some terrible, shocking things happen to me, but it's made me the person I am. I've got a character. I've got balls, I know how to haggle, how to hustle, how to get myself in there, I've got confidence, and I've created success, and that is only as a product of my upbringing. And I think we just need to be very careful that we're not saying...
But that's not our point, that's not my point.
I want to come in here, because I also feel, having gone through some horrific experiences, including...
Recently as well.
Yeah, but also worse than this, including witnessing torture in prison in Egypt. I would not change my life experience because it's made me who I am. However, and this is where I think perhaps you will maybe soon, one day, hopefully, have a change of heart with regards to this one thing. No, this one thing, which is when we look at our children and we say, do I want my child to have gone through this or being tortured in jail just to have my life experience and wits and street smarts? And that's where you start thinking, OK, whoa, you know? And I think, actually, I'm glad I'd never heard of this lady, Dolly Alderton, before. I'm glad she's admitting this. It's a first step. I'm a bit curious as to why people are criticising her for admitting it, because they're the ones saying you're privileged. They're saying you're privileged, but they're criticising her for admitting her privilege, which is a bit weird.
No, to be fair to her, what she's really saying, she feels a guilt.
She feels guilty.
Is what she feels.
Which is
can I read the quote?
Sure.
So this is what she said in the article. I know that a person's education does not solely define their fate. I know that. As well as having exceptionally good fortune, I have worked exceptionally hard. I can't change my education, and neither can I resent it because of what it has given me. But it has left me with some confronting questions that no debating society could have prepared me for. Questions like, how has my education impacted my life? Do I have to repent for a privilege I did not choose? And is there any point in justifying what we know is unjustifiable? And she knows without a question, had she not had that education, chances are she would not have known the right people to get the initial break into the media. Chances are, in the newsroom, she would not have been taken seriously in the same way. Michelle, you have even said yourself, when you open your mouth, people have certain expectations about who you are.
No, they think I'm thick.
That you have, you have to challenge in that moment. So I
don't need to challenge. If someone thinks I'm stupid based on what I sound like, well, then more fool them.
No, but my point is, she doesn't have to deal with that.
Did you see?
And there's a certain level of agency that gives you.
Greg raised. Sorry, one white man looks the same as another. Whoa, sorry. What Greg raised?
Are you telling me I look like him?
What Greg raised? I would say this kids thing, right? You said 90% suddenly went from 50% to 90%. I'm dealing with that right now. So I've got this 2-year-old. And I'm wondering, what do I do with his education? And I've got all of these questions because I don't want him to have...
But do you give him this?
Hang on.
Or what
you live in East London, where the education system has been completely turned around in the last 10 years. And the state schools are extremely good. Why are you worried about sending your kid there?
No, but there are other issues that you have to deal with living in urban areas in London that perhaps you don't have to deal with if your child is in a country manor somewhere.
There are a lot of stabbings, for example, in East London, and, you know, you start thinking of, when you read these stories about kids getting stabbed, and you start thinking, well, OK, if he's in a boarding school, for example, he won't have to be walking the streets where a gang attacks him. But ultimately, I think, I might end up erring on the side of mixing with others because I believe in that kind of society.
So do I.
There's no doubt, is there, that little Rupert, who gets teed up in Oxford, gets teed up and usually travels a lot further than little Johnny, who's teed
Or
up
Kevin.
in... Yeah. Or Kevin, who gets teed up, you know, and just completely trodden over.
Then surely,
you know.
to me, the answer is improving the opportunities that the people in state schools get, rather than trying to make people...
That's
that's
far too easy. That's far too glib a thing to say, honestly, that you will improve all state schools so they're like this. They're not buying just education.
Yeah.
They're buying
Access.
privilege.
Privilege.
Access.
Yes.
Yeah.